This is First Encounter, a podcast exploring both the foundations and the future of historical romance. Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Encounter. My name is Andy James, and I am a historical romance enthusiast and author. And today is one of our historical romance classics deep dives. And what we're discussing is Alyssa Cole's An Extraordinary Union, which I loved, and we will get into why in a minute. But I am joined today by our guest, Angelique Prince, who is going to be in conversation with me about this book. Some of you may recognize Angelique from TikTok or Instagram. I first asked Angelique if she wanted to join me here when she was doing some great posts in February for Black History Month, talking about Black women writing in historical romance, which I love because we need more focus on that always. I know I'm certainly someone who needs to read a lot more varieties, and so this is something I'm excited to talk with Angelique about, and specifically this book, which is really great. I feel like this book has got a little more attention lately, specifically because it's one of the ones that Julia Quinn selected for her JQ editions, and it's getting the special edition treatment, which I'm very excited about. Can't wait to get my copy kind of later in this year. September, I think, is when it's coming for those of us who subscribed to that. But thank you, Angelique, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this book and historical romance. It's been a whirlwind to kind of like dive into this genre, especially on social media, because it is not typically, a trendy genre right now.
It is not a trendy genre right now, and we're trying to change that. We're trying to show people what's great about this genre through this podcast. I don't know if it's reaching anyone who's not already a diehard, but you know what? That's okay.
We will hope so and be positive that it will,
We hope
because
so.
it's such a good genre, and I feel like it doesn't get its due outside of like the Netflix Bridgerton craze right now.
Yes, and I'm very appreciative of that for the little attention it brings, but there's so much more than that, which we all know. Thank you for joining me today. So everyone, here's a little bit about our lovely guest, Angelique Prince. Angelique has always been in love with love, from anime like Sailor Moon to classics like Pride and Prejudice. She has long been fascinated by the way love stories come together. She began writing fan fiction in high school, like many people, and later pursued writing in college, where she earned 2 degrees in professional writing. After many years in the technical writing world, she returned to creative writing as a historical romance author. She believes historical romance offers us a lens through which to better understand our present world. I 100% agree. A top 10 finalist in the 2025 Harlequin Romance Includes You mentorship, which is so exciting, but sad that Harlequin is going away. Angelique
Don't
also
get me
serves.
started on that.
Oh, I know. We could have a whole conversation on that. Angelique also serves on the board of the Greater Detroit Romance Writers as VP of Programming, which is very exciting. And when she's not writing, Angelique can usually be found knitting, traveling with her family, or binging historical dramas on TV, which many of us also love as well. So again, thank you for being here with me today, and I'm very excited to talk about this book. But before we dive into this classic from Alyssa Cole, talk to me a little bit more about your writing and some of the projects you're doing. I know it probably those of you who are familiar with you might be like, why the heck isn't Andy talking to you about Beverly Jenkins? Because I know you've been doing this kind of read along and discussions of Ms. Bev's works. So can you tell us a little bit about that project, why you're doing it, and then what's going on with your own writing?
So first of all, with the Beverly Jenkins books, me and another creator on TikTok who goes by Acting Brand New and Reading, or sometimes writing, but you can find us for mutuals. We started the Bez Baddies Book Club, just because we were mutually going back and forth about how much we loved this book. She had first discovered it. I was excited to find new Beverly Jenkins fans who were like in and around my age group on TikTok, especially because, like, it's not really the trendy topic right now on the BookTok world.
No.
So with our collective excitement, she reached out to Beverly Jenkins, and we actually had like a fan chat with her, and about like 20 people across TikTok. And one of the things that came up was like, how should we engage with your book, your collection? Like, what would you recommend for people who are new to you? And she said, read it in chronological order. So me and my friend were like, this is an amazing opportunity for us to do that. So we set a very ambitious goal last year that kicked off on Juneteenth because it just seemed appropriate to
It does feel
read at
appropriate.
least three of her books. Yes, yeah. So we read three of her books a month. We just wrapped up this past April. No, wait, no, March. We're in April. No, so past March with her most latest three books, which is the Rebel Women Who Dare series. And it's just been so fun to kind of like discuss these books, see the breadth of her writing and see the trends and like really do a deep dive on a particular author who I've been a fan of for years. Like have always been checking for her books whenever I'm in the bookstore. And so I'm hoping to see more from her. I know it's kind of a rocky road right now for historical romance, especially even with the
Mhm.
bigger authors like Beverly Jenkins. I've
Yeah.
heard like, Gianna Shoup and Julia Quinn, like they're not still being asked to write those books. So I guess to transition to that, like my projects, I have two projects in the works that feel a little nebulous. So I'll talk about the first one that's more concrete. I recently got asked to join a group of historical romance authors who are indie authors to do a Kindle celebrating diversity in historical romance release. So we're all gonna
Love
write,
that.
yeah, so we're all gonna write novellas that feature some sort of diversity within the historical romance genre and release them kind of together on a like monthly by monthly cadence in 2027. So I'm really excited for that. I have a novella that I've titled Unladylike Confessions that will be a part of that, set in a diverse Regency world that kind of like is inspired by like the diversity that we see on Netflix. Bridgerton, I really wanted to do something like that, but like kind of worried about like how to pitch that, to be honest, to traditional publishers. So this feels like a really great avenue to do that, and it's all about a young lady on the marriage mart who feels out of control by the idea of being judged and looked at and picked. So she writes reviews about the men that she comes across on her dance cards,
I
and
love
leaves them
that.
for others to find, and it's anonymous. So, like, this, of course, is going to get her into trouble.
Oh my gosh, that's one of the best plot ideas I've heard in a long time. That is fantastic because yeah, like you're being constantly judged. So let's return a little bit of that and figure out who these men are.
It's
That's
a
great.
little, it's not like quite gossipy like Lady Whistledown, and it's more like, I don't
Right.
know, a Regency burn book where you're venting your frustrations about these men.
I love that. I love that so much. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Well, I'm really excited to see what happens with all this and where your writing goes. Um, and before all this, I did say it's probably like, why am I not talking to Angelique about Beverly Jenkins? And it's because I've already set up a time in a couple months to talk about one of Ms. Bev's books with another person. So that's coming. You guys just anticipate in a couple months we're talking about Beverly Jenkins. And so I didn't want to repeat an author too much, but I did think it was important still to have this conversation with Angelique about this book specifically because like I said, it kind of was raised in my awareness through the JQ editions. And I was like, oh, I should read that. And also because, like I said, I just wanted to really kind of have some conversation about the work you were doing, highlighting Black women authors in this genre. Um, which I think is really important. But I love that you got to talk with Beverly Jenkins and you're doing what she recommended in terms of how to engage with her work. I think that's really exciting. So I will put a link to some of the posts and videos and TikToks and things that Angelique has done around that project in show notes. So you can find some of those because I think that's very exciting. So, the book we did read that we are discussing today is An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole, which is the first book in her Loyal League series. I haven't read the rest of the series, but now I want to. I definitely can see where at least the next book maybe is going. She set that up well in the epilogue. And I'm sure some of you have already read this if you're listening. If not, and you're listening anyways, like I'm a crazy person that does that. I listen to conversations about books I haven't read yet. I don't think this has to be said at this point, but spoilers from here on out. We are definitely going to discuss this book. We're not going to hold back on. So just be warned if you haven't read it yet and you care about that. So, oh gosh, where to start? So I guess first of all, for those who may not know, and just to kind of summarize if you haven't read this in a while, this is a book that takes place towards the beginning of the Civil War. Several times mentioned where they're hoping the war will end soon or they're hoping it won't be a long conflict. And I'm just like, oh Lord, people, you have no idea.
Yeah. I always cringe at that part too. It doesn't matter what book
Mhm.
it is, and I'm just like, everyone
Yeah.
had such naivety about like the time it would take to defeat the other side, and this
Yeah.
was going to be a quick hit sort of thing.
I know. I know. And just reading it right now with having just started the war in Iraq, I'm just like, oh, okay. Does that mean this is what we're up for too? I hope not. Hi, this is Editing Andy here. I just wanted to say real quick that I obviously meant the war with Iran, not Iraq. I hope that's clear, but I just wanted to insert that I'm not completely naive to what's going on in the world. So, the war with Iran. Now, back to our scheduled programming. But anyways, sorry. It's
And I
just
have
the
to say, like, I
parallel.
read this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was going to say, I read this when it first came out, and just the world was so different. Even though things were kind of shaky, it wasn't as bad as now, and it lands much heavier to read this book in 2026 than when I read it, I think in like 2017 or
Yeah,
2018 when it first came
2017 is
out.
when this was published. I guess we should say that too. And that's one of the so I mean, we try to do a little prep for these things. So I sent Angelique some of my thoughts beforehand, and one of them was just how hard hitting this feels right now. I mean, I think, speaking as myself, but I think many authors who write in historical romance, and as you mentioned, one of the reasons you love it in your bio is kind of being able to see present day or even past events, I guess, through kind of a different lens, right? It's the same as like when we read fantasy or sci-fi, like just being in a slightly different setting allows us to see issues in a different way that we may be engaging with today. And this was written in 2017, but because of the way, the timeline of publishing, my guess is it was written 2016 or even earlier, right? And so it probably, maybe it was, I don't know, but it probably was not a direct commentary on Trump. I don't think it was intended that way. But reading this now, like, I'm going to get real political for a minute, y'all. Sorry. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone who's read any of my books or heard me talk much that I'm extremely opposed to this administration and have been since the moment he walked down, well, didn't walk, but floated down an elevator and came into our lives 10 years ago, unfortunately. Um, but like, the parallels to what we're experiencing now just was so blatant to me in terms of like, so the book is the beginning of the Civil War. They are in the South. They are, I should know what city they're in, and I am blanking on it. Is it Charleston?
I think it's
They're in
Richmond,
Richmond.
Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're not even in the deep South. Yeah, I just looked. It's Richmond, Virginia. So we're not even in the deep South. We're kind of very close to the north. There's been a lot of skirmishes happening. Like, we know the war is on, but I don't think we've seen how bad it can get quite yet. Like, they have
No,
food shortages, but it's not really impacting wealthy people, of course. Like,
it
the
is
wealthy
not yet.
Southerners are fine.
No, no. So our main character, Elle, she's working for the Loyal League. She is a spy. She is working to gather intel for them because she has what they refer to as her gift. Essentially, she has a photographic memory. I mean, they don't call it that, but she's able to recall, anything that she reads, anything she hears. Like she just has this like memory that just captures everything perfectly and retains it, right? Very helpful for a spy when you're gathering intel.
So it's an excellent power for a spy, but
Mhm.
also it's a little bit of a downfall because she says she remembers
Yes.
everything. Every chamber pot she's cleaning while she's posing as a slave. Like that
Yeah.
part, I would hate.
I know, and there's an episode later where she does have to shoot someone to protect herself, and she's like, "I'm gonna see that forever." And so it's a gift and a curse, as I think many gifts, like, of such an extraordinary nature are, right? There's pros and cons, but it serves her well. So she is working for the union, and they have placed her, unfortunately, as Angelique just mentioned, as she is posing as a slave right now, in the home of a senator for the South. So we get to see all the just lovely thoughts and treatment and all the horrible things that she is
Yes.
exposed to. Hmm.
We see that firsthand, and, like, thinking about the parallels of today and, like, then, I'm always struck by the fact that the reason, like, people like Elle and, many Black spies were able to do what they did is because they were dismissed so
Yes.
easily out of hand. Like,
Yes.
you're talking about state secrets
Mhm.
and acting as if they're part of the furniture, and it's just, like, such a level of hubris that baffles my mind even to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, it's commented on multiple times in the book. And there's, one part where she literally is able to hear like the top secret information she's been seeking because they just dismiss her and forget she's there after she served these gentlemen their drinks, right? Um, and I actually, let me find it. I pinned a couple comments that kind of, or a couple highlights in the book that talk about this. But another part, though, I guess, is that I don't know if this was intentional or just to protect her because she definitely has opinions and a bit of a sassy mouth. But so she's posing as she's a slave as being mute. So she's not able to communicate. But that's part of kind of the disguise, I guess, undercover, if you will, because they, dismiss her even further because everyone around her is like, oh, this simpleton, she doesn't understand anything. Like,
Yeah.
and it's
The
just
Caffertys,
horrific.
who are the senator, right? The
Hmm.
Caffertys, they dismiss her
Yeah.
because she's a mute. They think she's dumb or whatever. Or even if
Right.
she hears something, she can't communicate that because they
Right.
assume as a slave she can't read or write. So what is she gonna do?
Mhm.
But I also think it's part punishment because you
Yeah.
kind of see her musings about um like I don't know what to call him, but like the leader of the Loyal League who kind of assigns her is like, oh, by the way, you need to be mute because I know you have a mouth on you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But there's a couple times, like this is a quote from our hero who we haven't even discussed yet, Malcolm. He says, Elle with the sharp tongue, Elle with the brilliant mind, Elle who is a million times too good for a man like him, but would always be seen as less than. And it's just this book just really hammers that home because she is so brilliant and extraordinary. And she's just on so many levels completely dismissed and disregarded. Um, And so the Caffertys is the household she's working with, and I think kind of a prime example of attitudes of the time, although we see it from many people, is his daughter Susie, who is one of the people Elle is kind of assisting with, and she is just this manipulative, horrible little woman. Um, but she's definitely one of the villains of the story, although I'd say there's many villains in different ways, depending on what we're talking about in terms of character setting, all of it. But
Yeah, and I think Susie's the most insidious of the villains, if I'm
yes.
being honest, because like everyone has this stereotype of a Southern belle, and
Hmm.
she ticks them all off, right? But like
Yes.
it's insidious because they also know how to weaponize themselves, and we see that happen later on when Malcolm, like he very much becomes subject to that because he also assumes she's, a flighty Southern belle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So it's really interesting. There's just so many layers here. It's very rich. And like I said, it does not shy away from presenting attitudes of the time. And this gets back to where I started rambling here, was kind of parallels I see to today because now that this conflict between the North and the South is more solidified, they are officially at war. It's still early, but everyone has very much kind of retreated into their camps and their mentalities of like the others are evil and wrong. We are right. No matter what is told to us, we believe these things that are totally not true. But, like we're part of this crew. We're riding for the South. Um, and it just felt so MAGA to me. I don't know how else to say it. I'm gonna get canceled, but I don't care. Um,
No, you're
yeah.
not wrong because like there's a line in the beginning that I underlined from Malcolm. and it's kind of where Elle is like grilling him. Like they rendezvous. So like at this point in the book, it's very early. They rendezvous. She doesn't realize she's going to meet him after having just met him at the Cafferty's, and he's dressed in
Yeah.
Confederate gray. So like
Yes.
she's rightfully questioning him. And he
Yeah.
says, I fight for the Union because America is supposed to be a land where people can be free from tyranny, where families aren't ripped apart to make a profit, where men aren't whipped for speaking their mind and women are abused worse than broodmares. And I can't help but think, like, this is still happening right now
It
with the
is.
whole ICE situation. You have families being ripped apart, they're
Just
captured on the street.
completely othering.
With all
Yeah.
of the Roe v. Wade stuff, women are literally being turned into broodmares. They're being denied, you know, fertility care or abortion care that they need. And it's just like, it was chilling. Like, I was like, I got to
It,
stop for a minute because it
I
hits
know.
hard.
Yeah. This was, I mean, I loved this book, but it was a hard read through today's lens and even the past lens because I'm also completely aware that this is the history that our administration is trying to erase, right? Pretend like this didn't happen, even though this is a huge part of our country's history. And we like, if we don't acknowledge this, where do we go? We've learned nothing. We have learned nothing as we're seeing, right? We know that. But, anyways, I'm rambling now again, but
I mean, it's hard to sit with because, like, you're right. On the one hand, they're trying to erase it, but at the same time, I feel like they're trying to get back to it. Like, they're just being very like a roundabout about it, and they're hoping people won't notice. But
yeah. Well, they're
like,
the
I
Cafferty.
we've seen this play out.
Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
Caffertys. They want this to work in a way that favors them and they can just ignore it, right? I didn't mean to go off there, but you did mention though everyone kind of underestimating Elle, including her supervisor in the Loyal League. And it's funny because I had told we have a Discord group for First Encounter. If you guys weren't aware, you should join that. It's fun. We chat about things. I did say, I was like, I'm sorry, you guys, this isn't a spoiler. It's literally the first page of chapter one. But I did put up a quote that I have to say here because I just loved it. It's like, oh, if this is the tone we're setting for this book, it's the prologue. It's not even chapter one. So let me get to the right place here. This is literally the first page of the book. She said, either her superior had dreadfully underestimated the Southern male's love of an opportunity to do violence, which we also see later in the book, or he'd purposely set her in the middle of danger. She doubted it was the latter, but the man was unduly annoyed at her for having the gall to aid her country without virtue of a certain appendage hanging between her thighs. And I was just like, I love this. Page one, this is the prologue. She has laid it all out there. And I was like, God bless you, Alyssa Cole.
I I love Alyssa Cole because she doesn't shy away from it. Like the fact that
No.
she's a woman, the fact that she's black, and how that deeply informs her worldview.
Yes.
Um, but it's also crazy because like women being spies is nothing new in history. Like
Oh,
they often are better at it than men because no one expects a woman to like be doing it in the first place. So
because they're dismissed. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're easily
Well, and
dismissed, but it's also like very tenuous.
yeah. And we should say too off the bat, Elle is based on a real person. So, Angelique, can you talk just a little bit about that? And I'll put some more information linked below.
Yeah, so and this is also too in the book, like again, this goes to the idea of bibliographies and like who puts bibliographies in historical romance and who doesn't. But Elle is based off of Mary Bowser. I'm looking to make sure I say her name right. And she was a former slave who had an eidetic memory or basically a photographic memory. And
Mm-hmm.
she did do work. She was basically in Jefferson Davis's White House and was working as a servant, a slave there, and funneled information to them. So that's true. The idea of Malcolm being a Pinkerton detective that was accurate too to the war. But yeah, like Mary Bowser, I think probably the most famous like spy was Harriet Tubman, just for her
Of
like
course. Yeah.
knowledge of the terrain. She did quite a bit during the war, and I have to imagine that like these women did not work alone, that there was probably a network that helped them of other women, of other slaves, and unfortunately we don't
We
get
don't know
that
them.
information.
Yeah. Yeah. That info, their names have been lost to history, but we know how this works. We know there was a lot of women helping out and supporting. But yeah, like you said, it wasn't unusual necessarily for a women spy, but Elle is so beautifully drawn. I mean, we feel her She was born into slavery. Her parents were slaves, but then they were freed by their master had died, the son inherited, and he freed them.
Yeah, so there's that.
When she was still pretty young. Elle was young. I don't remember if it mentions an actual age, but still pretty young.
Yeah, I want to say she was probably elementary age, it sounds like. She probably
Yeah.
would have been still very young when
For
they
some reason,
went
10
north
sticks in my
after
head.
being
I don't know if
enslaved.
the book actually says that or not, or if I'm making that up.
I don't think it I don't think it does. I think you just get the
Yeah.
impression she's like school age, like probably
Yeah.
on the younger end of it. Like so she
Yeah.
experienced slavery and I think there's a point where she mentions like she didn't quite know she was enslaved. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
neo slave narratives, which fun fact, that's like another genre I love to spend time in. Um and there's always a thing about that genre is there's always a point where a child realizes that they are not just a child, but they're also a slave. And
Mhm.
that age varies, but it's usually like a shift that happens and like, well, now you're 5 or 6, you're old enough to do a little bit of work, and so your day becomes less about play and more about work. And I think for Elle, I wanna say there's a point where she talks about remembering, being by her mother and maybe
Mhm.
doing light work, but she was not fully into it yet. She wasn't fully expected to pull in the amount of work an adult would.
Mhm.
So and that probably would have been, like, realistically under the age of 7 or 8.
Mhm. Yeah, but so she has lived life kind of in on both sides. So she has some basic understanding from when she was a child, but she didn't really live that life, as in the same way as you just explained. And then she grew up kind of in the North, right? In a free community. Not to say that life was wonderful, but she was in a free community, and so she obviously is working for the union. But now she's posing as a slave, and so her perspective, having both and seeing, her frustration at having to be just subjugated to things, so her wanting to fight against some things in a way that maybe other slaves are like, I'm past the point of fighting, like, that's just gonna cause more trouble." And so just the different mentalities based on people's backgrounds and situations, and it's so fascinating. Um, and we haven't even talked about Malcolm yet. So let's talk about Malcolm. So our hero, sorry, I'm
Okay.
but he is such he's again, Cole wrote kind of the perfect hero. So he is posing as a rebel soldier. So as you mentioned a little bit ago, when Elle first meets him, he's in gray and she has no idea that he is also a spy, right? And so she's just like, who is this man? She's actually scared that he's gonna molest her when she first meets him.
Yeah, that
Um,
scene has so much tension. Like their quote unquote meet cute is
mhm,
it's kind of the opposite. Like there's nothing cute about the situation. She's in the dining room by herself, and then you have this, for all intents and purposes, a Union soldier come in, and we
mhm.
know Malcolm is like struck. Like he sees her and immediately is like, oh, this is something. He's immediately attracted to her, and her first thought is like, I hope I'm not gonna get essayed. Like, and that is a
Yeah.
very real fear for her.
Yes.
So she's fearful. And Malcolm clocks that. And I think this is where we have the save the cat moment, for lack of a better phrase. Like, he could have been charming and try to flirt with her, but he realizes
Mhm,
through her body language, oh, she's afraid and she's thinking,
mhm.
I'm going to do something untoward to her. So he immediately just switches up his approach, which,
Yeah.
although it's commendable, it still does not like leave Elle in total safety.
No. No, not at all. And another thing that I think was a stroke of brilliance with how this character was built, though, is we understand later in the book that part of the reason he was able to clock that and did change his attitude is his own history because he is Scottish. He has Scottish heritage. I mean, he was raised in the US, but his family and history is Scottish, and they moved there because of the clearances that were happening in Scotland. And so he and his people and his culture and all of that have kind of this understanding of being pushed aside, being thought of as less than. So he kind of
Yeah,
has that fighting
he's had
spirit
a
of
version of
people.
oppression.
Yes, yeah, he understand it's not in any way the same as slavery, which he later comes to realize he kind of has an
But
understanding,
he
but
sees
not
the
an
parallels. Yeah,
yeah,
like he sees the parallels, like his
yeah,
mother experience, like
yes,
sexual assault because of the clearances and what happened. And so he understands what imperialism can do to families. And
Yes.
that plays into why he's there, why he's fighting for the union,
Yeah.
and to preserve it, because he knows what happens when
Mhm.
tyranny is left unchecked.
Mhm. See, much better said than I could. So, yeah, he understands the implications. And so that's why he is fighting for the North, this new country that he now lives in. But one of the things that I also love that Cole does in this book, and you mentioned this in our email, so I'll let you kind of expound on this because again, you say it much better than I do. But there's a point in the book where Malcolm realizes, like, "Oh, I thought I understood that slavery was bad and that, what I was fighting for, but like, oh, I didn't really have any idea until he sees more of the challenges through his interactions with Elle and what she is subjected to, what she is fearful of, um, things that could happen to her and do happen to her throughout the course of this book. And it's kind of this wake up realization for him of like, oh shit, I don't actually understand this.
It's very abstract for him, and I think that
Mhm.
is probably true for a lot of people during this era. It's probably still true to today. Like, the
Yeah.
idea of slavery and its impact is so abstract.
Hmm.
For Malcolm, at least in this case, he's only knows that it not only knows, but like, it boils down for him like, this is bad. We have to end it. He doesn't really
Yeah.
think about the individual consequences of that. And I think that's true throughout history. Like, if you
Oh,
look
yeah.
at the Civil War and then the Reconstruction period that followed, no one really thought about the after of that. Like, how do you deal with all of these people who are suddenly free? They need jobs. And that's why you have that the North abandoning the South and leaving the Reconstruction era to like basically decay every bit of progress that they made over that time. And for Malcolm, he's unable to conceptualize that because he's not seeing it firsthand. He's only able to do that because of his relationship with Elle, because he comes to care for her so deeply that he realizes like, oh, she's in this situation. She's got to deal with crazy Susie and her mother on a daily basis. She has no control over, being able to come and go as she please, or he experiences it through himself. Like, oh, I want to go and like sit and talk to Elle. I don't want to go and sit and talk to Susie and pretend to flirt with her. Like, he wants to be with her openly and in public. And it's only through relationship with her that he can see that this is not just like high level lofty ideas. This has real impact for people.
Yeah. No, and I think it's so important. And I mean, me as a white woman reading this book, like it made me check myself too, because I don't think about these issues in the same way. I fully admit that because I think myself an intelligent and aware person, but at the same time, in no way in my life have I had to experience any kind of othering or discrimination or putting down because of my race. Like I experience it as a woman, but in no way because of my race. And with the history of our country, that's a big thing, big thing. And so I really appreciated that perspective being explicitly kind of shared in this book because I think for a lot of us reading it, we need to like have that moment and think in the same vein as Malcolm as well.
And there's even I don't think I saved it, but there's even a point in the book where Malcolm realizes like, oh, this war is not about like states'
Yes.
independence. It's really about slavery, because this is
Did I
what the
save that?
South is fighting for. They want to keep their slaves, which for him to think that in that era is sort of revolutionary, because like I remember being in elementary school and still having teachers say, "Oh, Civil War was not about slavery; it was about states' rights." And it took me a long time to realize that. Well, what rights were they fighting to have? The rights to have slaves. So when people say that, it's almost like disheartening, as if slavery was an afterthought. Like, no, it wasn't. Like, the rich white people of the Confederacy wanted to keep their way of life, and they duped a lot of poor white people into fighting for that in the hopes that they would somehow also get that same lifestyle, even though they never were going to have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I do love that he had that moment and that is explicitly in here. But one of the shifting gears slightly, I think, the stuff that we've laid out here about these characters and how they're built. One of the things that struck me as I was reading through this is, we always talk about conflict in stories. Like a good story has to have conflict, like it just has to. And so, thinking about this from the writing perspective, not necessarily the reading perspective, like when you're coming up with an idea for a story, right? It's like, well, if this is one of my protagonists, I usually think of a character before I think of, who's then going to be their other kind of person to play off of. It's like, who can be someone who's kind of opposite to them or their goals and oppose them and create that conflict. Conflict, though, is different from stakes. It's part of it. They're linked, they're interrelated, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So I don't think my books are necessarily low conflict, but they're low stakes, like the things that I read. Like I'm not necessarily writing like a huge adventure story in my own books. I'm more focused on kind of internal character change, those kinds of things, right? So there is conflict there between what you think you want, what you actually want, how do you achieve those things, how can you meld with this other person, but the stakes aren't very high. Like nothing's going to happen necessarily if that doesn't happen or fall through, right? um what I think this book does so well is there's not just like there's multiple layers of crazy high stakes here, right? So first of all, there's just the fact that we discussed like both of them are spies. So Malcolm's working for the Pinkertons, Elle's working for the Loyal League. Communicating but different kind of structures, reporting, all that, but they're both spies, so that in of itself major stakes. They're both undercover here in different ways. And then there's also the stakes of their relationship itself. She is a Black woman, he is a white man. While that in the end may not matter to them personally, it's still very much going to matter in society and culture and how they're accepted and how they're interacted with. And there's a lot there. And so I love that there was multiple layers there because it's kind of like they're fighting through things on different levels. So, in one sense, she's like, Elle has a hard time trusting Malcolm, even when she knows, that he is undercover and he's working with her. But just everything that she understands, there's constant pushback, mainly from her as the Black woman in this situation, but against their ability to be together, right? Like Malcolm realizes like this will be hard, but he's just like, but I love you. And she's kind of like, hold up. And so she's the one resisting this much more at first. But there's just kind of this undeniable attraction between them. And so one of the things I found myself thinking about, and I'd be interested in your perspective as a reader and a writer on this. I feel like often in books, there's more of but I just can't help myself because I'm so drawn to you and I'm ignoring everything my brain is telling me, then maybe we actually go with in real life. And that's part of the fantasy of setting up a romance book. I'm not trying to like poo-poo this. I love it. I eat it up in the books I read. I ate it up in this. And I think that there's Cole does a great job of really showing the mental gymnastics that have to go on, right? Of like, this person isn't right for me in any way, like, and there are examples of people throughout history and real life who obviously have said, screw it, we're going to be together anyways. Not ignoring that it's going to be very difficult, but accepting that. So I'm not saying this never happens, but I feel like this is something in the book I kept being like, is it realistic for you to just go with this? But they're just like, but I can't help myself. And I think that's true. And I'm not saying this isn't a good or a bad thing. It just struck me as I was reading it. And I was like, I feel like there's a level in a lot of books, in romance books, where we just kind of ignore what we know is not good for us and we go with it anyways.
So I think to your point, the way Cole does this
Mhm.
is I think I found it more like nuanced than you would in like maybe a typical like spy romance type of thing where
Yes.
they immediately go at it. Like
Yeah.
I will say Malcolm is definitely he lets his intrusive thoughts win because at the rendezvous point when they're
Oh,
hiding
yeah.
in the bushes together, he's like thinking about caressing her leg. He's not really he's not
Yeah.
focused on what he's supposed to be focused on. So he's
He's not.
definitely the one who, yeah, let's do this. I don't care. And it's Elle pushing back. In fact, he kind of has to like I think you mentioned this earlier, like he has to win her trust before she
Yeah.
will totally let herself go. Like she recognizes that she might have some attraction to him, but she's like, I got to keep my head
Yeah.
on my shoulders. I can't get wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
But I like the way it's almost a push and pull. Like he
Yeah.
realizes she's not going to fall into a whirlwind with him. He has to win her trust and he has to show it, not just say he's going to do it. He has to show it. So I appreciated that, like, in 1 minute they're arguing and in the next they're making out in the grocer McTavish's back. Like I love that scene
Yeah.
because not just because, it's like heated, but because before that she's like grilling him. She's like, "Who are you? Can I trust you?" And then they end up on this conversation about race and slavery and like what it is all for that they're fighting. And she is rightly frustrated. Like she's been undercover for weeks, presumably, if not months. I don't think we really know. I don't remember.
I don't think
And
it
he just
really,
like
yeah.
lets her unload and
Mhm.
like offers that to her. He doesn't try to like
Mhm.
calm her down or reason it out. He
Yeah.
lets that emotion be. And I think that like shows her, but he's also like can't help himself. Like
Mhm.
he ends up kissing her and
Yeah.
she's not immune to that. So like it's kind of
Yeah.
like this,
You can't fight
can
that.
I be safe with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have a little moment, but then she's like, I gotta pull
Mhm.
myself back together. Like I
Yeah.
can't I can't keep
He
doing
fights it
this.
for a long time. I mean, tension in the book. I mean, I get it. You gotta prolong these things. But one thing I appreciate too is you mentioned Malcolm kinda lets her unload and just whatever. He never tries to minimize her experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes people brush it off and, "Oh, it can't be that bad," and buck it up, and it's just,
I gotta say, like reading this now that I'm a little bit older, and just as a Black woman, I think I appreciate that so much more because there's sort of this expectation that, Elle's gonna be hard hitting, she's gonna have be sassy, she's gonna be strong. But really what Malcolm does for her is he gives her the space to be soft, to be vulnerable, to be
Mhm.
weak, because
Yeah.
again, she's alone in the South. A lot has happened. Oh, by the way, she's doing all of this and her friend got stolen into slavery, so she's
Yes.
got that in the back of her mind. She's got the
Mhm.
fact that her parents don't know where she is and what's happening to her in the back of her mind. That's a lot of weight to carry. And he, more than once throughout the book, we see them like alone together, and she gets to just kind of like release all of that, or at least not feel like she has to hold up a mask to that. And I think that's really important for Black women is to
Yeah.
see like softness in addition to like the strong Black woman trope. Like we've been strong Black women to death. Like let us
Mhm.
be soft and vulnerable sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things too, I think that's commented on a few times throughout here, they end up through some information they discover, they kind of find out the ship's being built that would be not great if the South had this advantage. It would be it
Yeah.
kind of
The
they call it
ironclad.
ironclad, yeah, and it's essentially their version of a battleship at that time. And they're trying to gather as much information about this as they can, pass it on. And there's a couple times where it's just subtle stuff where, the first time information's passed along, I can't remember specifically if it was like Malcolm's. No, I can't remember who. But
Yes. No,
basically,
I
they're not
remember that
really
part.
buying into it.
Yeah.
They're like, we need more information. Is this really a threat? Like, it's not a big deal. And the question is, well, this information came from Elle. So is that why it's not being given the weight it deserves? Like, there's always this question because again, she's a woman and she's Black, and it's just I just love that that was brought up a couple times. Just always this having to fight harder to be recognized, believed, even though she's been put in this position. It's still that question of like, can we trust what you're
Yeah.
telling us?
And it's
Or
like disjointed. Like
mm-hmm.
the Pinkertons one aspect of the war. You got like the actual military who probably has spies, and you got the Loyal League, who's probably like an offshoot of the Underground Railroad and like the
Yes.
abolitionist circle.
Mm-hmm.
So like everybody's working towards the same goal, but it's not like there's one oversight. And so when some information comes from outside, they're questioning it more. They're like, and I don't even know. Like we don't know if they know that it was Elle who sent that information. Like, maybe they
Yeah.
just know it was a spy from the Loyal League. And do they say, oh, it's probably, questionable at best, sort of thing? Um, And I think you see it on Elle's side too. Like she gets bad intel
Mhm.
that ends up getting some people killed, and that
Yeah.
really sticks with her.
Yes. Yeah. That really messes her up. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like it could be a million reasons why people aren't taking that as seriously, but like that question is always gonna be in your head of like, is it because this came from me? And I hate that. And but I love that that was included because it's so real. It's so real. Then and now, sadly. But
But I just have to say real quick about Susie.
yes,
I
please
love
tell
that
me
her
about Susie.
mom slapped the mess out of her at one point. I was like, I have to note it because I'm like, it is what she deserves.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. We all have like someone eating at us, pecking at us, and different. Oh, yeah.
But oh, and I did wanted to bring this up. So like Malcolm and Elle, they're in these situations. It's always fraught. Like there's always this like team point. It's a high level of stakes, but it feels like it starts high and then it even builds more. But I
Yes.
love that we see these moments for them to be alone together to like snatch some intimacy. Um, and I don't know, for me, it just like hits home, like this idea of the world is crazy, and yet you can still like have a moment to find some kernel of happiness. And I think that's what I love most about like romance. It's like there's
Yeah.
always going to be some kernel of happiness, no matter what craziness is going on. And I think that even with the heavy topics of the book, it's a reminder of this is why romance is just such an amazing genre because we get to celebrate finding someone or having safety, even if it's only for a few minutes, and we're in the bushes somewhere, waiting on rebel spies to come by or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point because I think I've been so focused on just kind of there's so much in this book, obviously. I mean, just with the setting and the topic and all of it. But it is at the end of the day of a romance, and it is a very romantic book. And there are just some gorgeous, gorgeous moments, like you said. And they're certainly always thinking about each other, when they're like, "No, refocus, like, I've got really important life or death things to figure out here," but this is truly a beautiful romance, and it is, like you said, such an example, I think, of why we turn to these books, at least myself and what I've heard other people say, and I think especially when times are hard, personally, myself and a lot of the people I know when we first, like, hard turned back into romance was COVID because you need that comfort. You need those moments that you know that even though this is a heavy story, it's still going to deliver those moments of hope and there'll be a
Yeah.
happy ending and they'll be together, right? And it's like you need that like mentality to be able to like cope and get through.
I love it, ATA. Like this is why I'm forever sticking with romance because like I don't care if I know they're gonna end up together in the end. That's not the point.
Yeah.
It's the journey along the way.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter that we know that they're gonna end up together. It's like, I need to know they're gonna end up together so I can make it through all the stuff where you're just
Yes,
like,
because otherwise, why am I
anxiety.
struggling? Like, why is like, because okay, so with the last few chapters, like
Yes.
even though I knew what happened, like your heart is still in your throat reading about them trying to catch the ship. So like at the end, of course everything goes to hell. And I love it because like it could have very much been Alyssa making Mal sa Mal save Elle again, but instead she's the one that saves him, gets
Yeah.
him and some of the slaves on that are the senator slaves to freedom. Like it's the women working together to make that happen that I think just like makes it so chef's kiss and like Malcolm's just
It
kind
was
of like along
beautiful.
for the ride. He's
Yeah.
injured
Yeah. He's been accused of being a spy, like not definitively found out necessarily, but accused. Um,
Because he wouldn't
'Cause Susie
seduce Susie, which I'm just like, you should have left that woman alone. Like
In the end, he
but
didn't need
I
her.
think it goes to like, yeah,
Mhm.
like he thought she would be the end for some sort of like information he needed, or like I think he was using her to get into the office, which was a mistake because once she showed up at his hotel like unannounced,
Yes,
which
I was
during this
like
era, like that's a no go.
I know, I was like, "This woman is ballsy."
Like she is not innocent as she appears to be.
No,
Like she's done some
no.
things.
Well,
She knows what she's about,
there
and that
was
was what
a
makes her
comment
dangerous.
There was a comment at one time from her father that we overhear. I think Elle overhears it or something where I don't remember exactly, but it was something about like you can have your little fun and you can, but we need to maintain, because she's throwing herself at Malcolm. And I can't remember exactly, but her father makes some comment that basically makes it known that, like, this is no innocent little lady and her family is aware of it. But as long as we keep up appearances, like, whatever. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
ooh,
I'm not shocked.
yeah,
I'm trying to remember and I can't either, but I'm like, I'm not shocked that
yeah,
that's would have that's like the way their family operates
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's fairly toxic. And you even have a comment from her mother about how like she can't land a man and
yes.
she's driven them away. She drove some specific guy away
Hmm.
before the war really kicked off and he went off to war. Like she couldn't close the deal essentially. So like
Yeah,
she's under this pressure to marry and she's probably like doing all of the things.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Anyways. Well, before we wrap up, I do want to get back to one thing. We were chatting a little bit before I hit record, and you mentioned earlier, when I talked about this being based on a real person, you mentioned the bibliography.
Um, I find it interesting. So when we look at historical romance, right, I don't think most people expect to see a bibliography in the books. But one thing that I do notice is that, Black, brown, people of color who write historical romance, they tend to do bibliographies. And, I think I've even heard this question asked of authors like Beverly Jenkins, like, why do you do this? And I believe she got it from another author who's was like, I think in the 50s or 60s. I think her name was Susan Johnson.
Mhm.
Um, she also did bibliographies. And it's almost like you kind of have to like provide proof of like, hey, here, Black people existed and we were doing these things. And it's based off of, there's some basis in history, right? Even though like I would argue that historical romance is just as much as a fantasy as, like fantasy is
Yeah.
basically. Like there aren't 50 dukes looking for young women to marry and they're
No.
not marrying the governess.
Right.
And if we can suspend our disbelief about a duke marrying a governess, why can't we suspend our disbelief about Black people being in this era? And I think because that barrier is there, you have people like Alyssa Cole, like putting their bibliography in, Beverly Jenkins putting bibliography in, so that we see, like, hey, we existed. We were not just slaves. We were doing amazing things in the 19th century and beyond. Yeah, I appreciated it for one. So
Mhm.
I love that she includes it because if you're a history buff, it gives you some place to go. But I also am like, it shouldn't be the thing that justifies the existence of your story. So it's kind of like a
Yeah.
catch-22. I love it, but I also don't think it needs to be like why we justify the existence of a Black heroine in a story, for example.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. There's a lot of authors writing who always include, these big author's notes. Like I'm not necessarily a writer who does that. I don't know if this is because of what I'm writing. I write Regency England, which is kind of generally understood to have. We understand the cultural cues of that based on just other things we've read in common culture, and so there's enough of a shorthand of that period that I don't feel like I necessarily have to go into all the history of it. But there's a lot of people who write, in-depth author's notes about maybe a historical event they reference, or a cultural piece of the time that influences something that happens in the book. But you don't necessarily see them referencing specific, but they might. But you rarely see kind of like that full bibliography like you would
Yeah.
do, like you're saying that the authors of color have done. And the fact that like there has to be that specific step of like, you're not going to believe me that these things happen in history. I have to specifically cite them. Like you said, it's great that that exists so people can find out this information if they want to dig deeper, but it's hard and sad that that has to be a thing. And this conversation, I've had with my friend Sri Savita, who writes Regency and has Indian characters and has constantly feeling like she has to write things and back up like why this could have happened and why these people did exist. And, it's like, how much do you put in? How
Which
much
is
do you
crazy
not?
because like
Hmm.
the British Empire was deep into, the the East Asian continent of
Yeah.
the time. So like
Yeah.
of course there would be instances of where their paths would cross. Like there's even like historical dramas about it. Like is it Beecham House or something like
Yes.
that? I think on
Mhm.
PBS
Yeah. Mhm.
is all about a British soldier in
Yeah.
India during I
Yeah.
think a similar Regency era. So
And
like
yeah.
the people of color exist, and they were
Yes.
in they had I think people forget how much of a reach the British Empire had and how much that facilitated people coming to and from London
Mhm.
and the country as a whole. So it's
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love to see more diversity in historical romance, just
Mhm.
because like we've always existed. We people of color have always been here, and not just spawned into existence in the 20th century.
No, I am all for it. It's something I struggle with, writing as a white woman where I'm like, this is in no way my own experience. And so how much do I have the right to center this, but I'm also not going to ignore this. And so I try to build it into the world that I'm writing. I try to build it into, having characters of all different backgrounds that exist, but I haven't to this point centered a person of color as a main character because I'm like, is that my place? I don't know. And that's a debate I always have with myself. And I think some people are like, no, we just need to raise up more own voices, which 100% we do. We need to support, authors of color, authors in the LGBTQ plus community. Like we need to lift up those people who can write of these experiences. But I'm also like, as a person who has a little bit more privilege within this community, is it on me to then write those things? I go back and forth. It's an internal battle. I don't know.
I think so. So I can say from like the LGBTQ, I agree with you. From my perspective, I think we need more voices of that.
Yes.
I don't think I should be the one to write that as a heterosexual woman. Like, I should not be writing more stories to fill that void. I think we should make room for authors from that background to tell their stories.
Mhm.
Not that other people can't. There's plenty of like heterosexual women that write sapphic romance. They write, male romances. Far be it from me to like pick and choose what people can and cannot do, but I
Right.
think
No, me
you
too.
gotta do it like with a sense of respect for the
Yes.
culture or like the like identity that you're trying to have. I know sensitivity reading is a huge thing. If I were going to
Absolute
undertake that,
must.
I would
Yeah,
definitely
absolute must.
want to go that route. But I think we just need to make room for them to like
Yeah,
exist in this genre. Like
exactly.
just speaking as someone who's querying and like doing it very like centered on like a few houses because I know historical romance is just not the it girl right now. It's very hard to kind of have your voice heard
Mhm.
because everyone wants an own voices story or say they want diversity in a manuscript wish list, but then it's a very different thing to go sell that to a publisher and then say, hey, how can we position this to a market? Like the publishers say they want it, but they're not really ready to actually market that. And unfortunately, I think that's the case for a lot of authors that end up in those camps. Like, they get the deal, but they don't get marketed as well as other authors, or, they don't get as much support as they would have hoped. And I'm sure that's probably true for no matter what kind of deal we get, whether it's a huge one or modest one. It's hard because there's an assumption of what the audience is. And I don't think people realize that like I've been since I was like 11 picking up Jane Austen, historical romances. I am not the target audience of anybody's marketing like plan of
Mhm.
going after like but we exist. Like we're there. We're quietly a
Mhm.
part of the community reading it. It's
Yeah.
just we're not recognized as that.
Yeah, I know. I wish there's more I could do personally. So before we wrap up, this was a great book. Obviously, you are an expert, we'll say. I'm doing air quotes for those of you listening on Beverly
Very
Jenkins.
generous of you.
Yeah, an expert on Beverly Jenkins. And so, but beyond, this, who should we be reading? What are books that you would highlight so we can broaden our own reading within historical romance?
Yeah, yeah. So beyond Beverly Jenkins, and of course Alyssa Cole, who,
Mhm.
spoiler alert, she only has like three books in this genre. So if you're
She
looking to
does.
like
Yeah, she doesn't write
demolish
as much
her
historical, but
her
we love
back
her
catalog,
anyways.
she's moved on to thrillers, but we still love her writings till
We
the
love
chef's
her.
kiss.
Yeah.
So Vanessa Riley, she's doing amazing like Regency romances. I think she does both traditional and indie stuff.
Yes.
And she does
Mhm.
also historical fiction. So if like straight romance isn't your vibe, she has amazing historical fiction about Black women who existed in history. Lisa Raines, Never Cross a Highlander. I can never say enough
That book
about
is
how much I
fantastic.
love that book.
Love that book.
And word on the street is she's coming out with a second book in that series.
Ooh.
And Adriana Herrera. So we have
Yes.
quite a bit of like Latinx, Latino, Latina representation, historical romance, and I
Mhm.
love it because we got her. We have Liana de la Rosa as
Yep.
well.
The Luna
And
Sisters.
there's just like the Luna Sisters, there's a host of indie authors who are holding it down.
Yeah.
Piper Hughley, Erica Ridley, Addie
Yep.
Dulac. I have lists. I could go on
I love it.
with them, but
Yeah. No,
just,
there's a
you
lot in the
know,
indie space right now, which I appreciate. And you just mentioned some of the ones that I know. Addie Dulac, wonderful. Erica Ridley for sure. Um, yeah. But if you, hey, I'll get you to send me a list and I'll include it in show notes. It'll be great.
I have like 23 people going so far, and
Love
whenever I
it.
come across an author
Mhm.
who's writing diversely, I add them to my list to go check out.
Love it. Love it. But the point is, there's people out there and we need to be reading them and supporting their work so that they can continue to put books out. Maybe TradPub will notice, like, oh, people like these books and then start supporting more of these authors.
Yeah.
So, anyways, read these books. They're wonderful. Angelique, thank you so much for joining me today. I really loved this book. And I know that Alyssa Cole has only written a little bit historical, but now I need to finish this series, The Loyal League. And I would love to chat with you again sometime, either about your own projects that you're working on, or if we do want to do a Ms. Bev sometime or something else. But um,
Yeah, no, I would love that. Thank you so much for
yeah,
having me
of
on here. I really enjoyed
course.
it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm happy to chat about my own stuff, even though I find it cringe to talk about my own writing. I probably need to practice.
Oh, I know. I host a podcast and I am the same way. So, where can people find you? I mentioned you're on Instagram and TikTok, but where else can people look
Yes.
for you?
So I just launched my website. I'm
Yay!
at angeliqueprince.com. I'm launching my newsletter, which is going to be just like a quarterly update about what I'm writing, the history that I'm looking up and researching as a part of my work, and some recommendations for diverse historical romances if you're interested in that. So again, it's angeliqueprince.com, which has my newsletter sign up and also my all of my socials. I'm Angelique Prince across my socials, or sometimes Angelique Prince writes, depending on like availability. But it's all linked there, so you can find me on
Perfect.
primarily um, Instagram and TikTok. I am on TikTok more than Instagram, admittedly, because I find it hard to engage on Instagram, but that's gonna be a problem.
Hey, different strokes for different folks. I'm the opposite, but it's just because I haven't immersed myself in TikTok as much yet. I will have the website and those social handles linked below so you guys can find Angelique and all the wonderful work and commentary that she's doing, which I appreciate so much. So, everyone, that's it for today. We will talk again soon. And thank you again, Angelique. All right. Bye.
Yeah.